Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Democracy Report. Today is May 13th, 2025. It is a Tuesday. It is raining here. It's a miserable day, and it looks like more miserable stuff we're going to talk about today on the show. Center of which I wanted to, well, first off, please like and subscribe, visit us on Blue Sky, and if you want to contribute to help the show out, greatly appreciate it at buymeacoffee.com/the Daily Democracy Report. Or you can scan the QR code in the bottom left corner of the screen if you'd like to donate that way. So thank you so much. And all right, so to get started on today, I wanted to really focus on the U.S. Constitution and what's going on and the lack, it seems, of knowledge by the Trump administration officials to actually know what's in the Constitution, which is kind of scary if, yeah, very scary, actually. So on today's show, I'm going to talk about the U.S. Constitution and the following topics. So we're going to go over a long clip, longer than I usually do, a couple minutes here on the FBI Director Cash Patel. He's discussing due process in a Senate hearing. It's pretty interesting stuff and really kind of scary. And then we're going to listen to, as much as I hate to do this, Trump advisor Stephen Miller. He's going to talk about habeas corpus and the mess at, well, whatever. And then Trump is defending getting his new free Air Force One jet from Qatar. We're going to talk about that and how and kind of what's in the Constitution and how this is all kind of wrong. So we're going to talk about that. But first off, I wanted to touch upon, which really isn't part of the show, I just wanted to kind of cover it a little bit, but the tariff stuff between China and the United States. I don't think any real deal has been struck here. It seems like it just is a pause. 90 days, the tariffs have been lowered to 30%, which is still extremely high. And China has reduced their tariff to 10%. So it's still a lot higher than it was, and it's still going to cause a lot of pain. So estimates about it was going to cost the average American family somewhere around $3,500 a year extra in their daily living expenses. Today, now with this pause and lowering of tariffs with China, it looks like it's going to be somewhere around $2,300 hit to American families, which is still way too much. It's these families that are kind of living on a budget and paycheck to paycheck that can't really afford this kind of turmoil and upheaval. So anyway, that's where we're at. I don't think anything else that I could tell. Everything I've went over doesn't seem like we've gotten anything else out of this other than China coming to the table and talking. So I guess that might be a win, but it's a horrible expense. So whatever you think about it, I think it's wrong. And the stock market today looks like it's doing fairly decently. Nothing extravagant. Looks like the Dow's down a little bit. S&P's up. NASDAQ's up. So things aren't looking bad. It looks like an almost semi-normal day in the market. So anyway, so let's get started on the show, what I wanted to do here. So this first clip that I'm going to play for you is Cash Patel. He's being questioned by Jeff Merkley. He's a Democratic senator from Oregon. And we're going to talk a little bit about due process here. At least they're going to talk about due process, or Cash Patel's lack of knowledge about what due process is. So here, let's. I'm going to pause this clip as we go because it's about 6 minutes long. I want to try to get through all of it because I think it's important for everybody to see this. Everybody might not be watching these kind of things on the news, and I think it's just interesting to see how just seems either unknowledgeable or lack of willingness to just be honest in these hearings. So let's hear what Cash Patel has to say, director of the FBI.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Director Patel. And so, as I understood it, you testified yesterday that you'd like to have another $1 billion added on to the FY25 level to do the additional work you'd like to do on drug interdiction, fentanyl in general, and anti-terrorism. And today you gave us a budget that requests cutting $500 million. Which is it? Do you want us? What are you asking of this committee? To add funds, add $1 billion, or to cut $500 million?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity. What I'm asking for is that with more, I can simply do more. And I was giving examples of what more I could do. I can do the mission, and am in support of the budget here, and I'm working with appropriators and you to fill the gaps.
So you support the budget presented that cuts $500 million, but you also support us adding $1 billion should we choose to do that?
Well, I can't not support the budget as proposed because then I would be supporting no budget.
Okay. Well, we've got those two options. We do look forward to further details from you about how you plan to modify the function of FBI on these different missions that you've highlighted today so that we can give it the appropriate consideration. Director Patel, you're familiar with the Fifth Amendment.
Yes, Senator.
And it is really the Freedom Clause.
So I guess I could have cut out that beginning part, but it just kind of shows the mentality here
Of the United States. It was 4 years into being a nation when Congress and the states said, hey, we have to make sure that there's not an over-aggressive government in the future that deprives us of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And you're familiar that that applies to all persons in the United States.
Yes, Senator.
So there's been a lot of concern about the several hundred immigrants who were swept off the streets of America and sent to El Salvador without due process. And does that concern you?
Senator, I'm not in a position to comment on whether or not they were given or not given due process or are supposed to be afforded due process. All the FBI did and all the FBI will continue to do is arrest those that have violated the law.
Okay, but to arrest, you have to investigate. Have you launched an investigation of this violation of the Freedom Clause of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, I don't know that I agree with your characterization.
Well, that was my first question, whether or not you agree with the Fifth Amendment and are prepared to defend it. It is your job to investigate crimes.
Yes, I agree with the Fifth Amendment. I agree with the entire Constitution, and the men and women at the FBI decide.
So are you going to launch an investigation of the reported violation of the due process of several hundred individuals?
Again, Senator, it's not for me to call the balls and strikes on it. The men and women at the FBI who are trained to open investigations will make those calls.
So you have no influence over whether an investigation is opened?
I have influence over it, but you're asking me a constitutional question. I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Well, it's actually not it's a question also of law.
But your position is that every one of those individuals is by constitutional right afforded due process. I don't know the answer to that. I'm telling you.
You haven't read the Constitution? It says all persons.
I've got it right here, but what you're saying.
Yeah, so let me just pause this for a second. I wanted to kind of, just to cover it really quickly in layman's terms. The Fifth Amendment prohibits the federal government from depriving individuals of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Pretty straightforward. It doesn't say citizens. It doesn't say anything like that. It just has persons, individuals, and that's it. right? The 14th Amendment, which we're going to get to as well, because it ties in, that extends the protection to state governments, ensuring that states must also follow due process when depriving individuals of these fundamental rights. So those two are tied together. This is what we're talking about here. And there's not much room. There's no room, actually, for interpretation of what that means. So let's continue.
Is that every single one of the illegals that was sent down to El Salvador is supposed to be given due process pursuant?
Yeah, that's what the Constitution says. It says no
doesn't
person.
say that.
It does say no.
So he just said it doesn't say that. It absolutely 100% says that. It's kind of crazy.
Person. Yeah, I'll encourage you to read it because it's also been affirmed by the Supreme Court repeatedly. On the case of Miranda versus Arizona, held the right of all individuals, regardless of citizenship status. The Supreme Court in Reno versus Flores. I mean, but it's the plain language of the Constitution. It concerns me that you're not familiar with the core concept of due process applying to all persons as written in black and white in the Constitution.
As the first public defender who's ever served at the FBI as its director, I am more aware of due process than any predecessor in my seat. You are delineating between removal proceedings and criminal acts. My job is to investigate criminal acts. That's what we do.
You are aware that the Fifth Amendment refers to taking away liberty, and when people are arrested on the street, detained and sent out of the country, that their liberty has been taken away.
Senator, that is a constitutional question that you are asking me to answer. It's not for me to answer.
The question has already been answered by the Supreme Court that they're protected. Therefore, it's a violation of law, and it's your responsibility to open an investigation, and you're saying today you will not do so?
I am not the agency involved in removal proceedings. That is a different branch of government.
So if an agency other than the FBI violates the law and the Constitution, you will not investigate because it's a different agency?
I will investigate every violation of law.
Well, you have, but you just said you're not investigating.
No, you and I are in disagreement on what is a violation of law. I have yet to hear from the Supreme Court your position as you have adjudicated it.
Well, very, very interesting, because the Supreme Court's been very clear, and I had heard you were trained in the law, so I expected maybe you would try.
He's the director of the FBI, for God's sakes. The guy should know the law, right? I mean, it's pretty plain and simple. It's written very clearly. It's not open for interpretation.
Uphold it. You also took an oath to the Constitution.
Thank you for the reminder.
Well, it's important to remind you, since you're apparently unfamiliar with the very basics of the core protection of freedom in our Constitution.
What I am familiar with is protecting the American public, and that's what
Let me close with one question, Mr. Chairman. Will you make sure that due process in every action of the FBI is completely honored under your time as director?
Will I ensure that due process is followed?
Yes.
Under the Constitution?
Completely. Send that message throughout the FBI that due process must be followed, is constitutionally required. Make sure that it's done under your direction.
Sure.
Sure. Whatever. Yeah. I'll send a memo out. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe not. I don't care. This guy clearly doesn't have any clue. He's in a job he's not even qualified to be in. He doesn't understand what he's charged with doing, and he's obviously not following the law. So pretty bad. And so you're gonna see, like, a lot of these things I'm talking about today has a lot to do with all these deportations and persons being disallowed due process and just being shipped off to some foreign country, right? But that extends also to just citizens of the United States as well. I mean, it extends to everybody who's set foot on American soil, regardless of who they are or where they are. So you're gonna hear today, like, this next topic we're gonna discuss is related as well. And it's another important one, and this is really kind of scary. So we're going to cut to this. This is Stephen Miller, and he's talking about suspending habeas corpus. We'll discuss it if you don't know what that is, but I think we're going to let Caitlin Collins here talk about this, and we have two clips to play here in this with Caitlin Collins here on The Source on CNN, so we can we can kind of get what Stephen Miller says, and then later on in this clip, she discusses this with an actual somebody who knows constitutional law. So let's start this clip.
Habeas corpus is a legal procedure explicitly mentioned in the Constitution. It allows people to challenge the federal government in court if they've been detained. And one of the president's top aides today, Stephen Miller, confirmed publicly that the White House is exploring this extraordinary step.
Well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. At the end of the day, Congress passed a body of law known as the Immigration and Nationality Act, which stripped Article 3 courts, that's the judicial branch, of jurisdiction over immigration cases. So Congress actually passed, it's called jurisdiction stripping legislation. It passed a number of laws that say that the Article 3 courts aren't even allowed to be involved in immigration cases.
Now, a legal expert that I'm going to talk to in a moment says everything you just heard there from Stephen Miller is not correct.
Okay. So I think she broke it down there pretty well, just to kind of get us, get your juices flowing here, right? So habeas corpus, the writ of habeas corpus is in the Constitution. It's in Article 1, Section 9. Article 1 deals with the powers of Congress. And it states this: the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Okay, so that's a lot that you have to get to, right? To make this thing be suspended. You have to have a case of rebellion or invasion, so you have to make the case for an invasion in this case. Now, maybe you could make the case. That's a really tough case to make, I think. But you also have to prove that public safety requires that habeas corpus be suspended. That's a lot to unpack. And also, it's a lot to prove, right, in a court. But the other thing is, it's in Article 1 of the Constitution, which is the powers of Congress. So the President of the United States, by default here, does not have the power to suspend habeas corpus on his own. It has to go through Congress. So, that's kind of the idea here, is that he can't just go ahead and upend this on his own. And we're gonna hear here in the clip here later on in this same topic with Caitlin Collins, discuss this a little bit further. So let's do that. Let an expert talk, not me.
Here tonight, as I mentioned, former Assistant U.S. Attorney and CNN's senior legal analyst, Ellie Honig. Ellie, you told me earlier when I asked you about Stephen Miller's comments, you thought his description there was wrong. Why?
Dead wrong, crazy, dangerous. Let's start with the Constitution itself. What Stephen Miller says essentially is the Constitution gives us the right to do this, to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, which, by the way, just means the ability to go to court to challenge a detention. He's saying the Constitution tells us we can suspend that. But if you look at the actual Constitution, Article 1 is a restriction. It says we should not withdraw the writ of habeas corpus unless there is a rebellion or an invasion and the public safety is threatened. The Constitution sets the bar incredibly high there, and the history bears it out, which you mentioned before. It's been invoked 4 times, right? Civil War, okay, I think we can understand that, and as Maggie said, it was controversial then. During Reconstruction, in a very narrow way, by the way, only in certain counties in South Carolina to try to counteract the Ku Klux Klan. In 1905, in the Philippines, when we had a hand in governing the Philippines, there was a real rebellion happening in certain regions. And then, what was the fourth?
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, right. And
that was the last time it was used, was 1941.
Exactly, 1944, and only, again, in certain areas of Hawaii. So it's been used very carefully in real invasions, narrowly geographically.
All right, so there's the whole history behind it. It seems ridiculous. I don't think it's ever going to fly. But these are all ways for the Trump administration to just grab people off the street, throw them into some sort of foreign country concentration camp or wherever the hell they want to send them, and forget about them. none of that, none of the things that you heard today are justifiable based on the Constitution, as I've read it to you, right? Or as you've seen, even from experts talking. So that's kind of about the, that side of it. So now we're gonna jump to President Trump, and I'm sorry we got to see his orange face today, but he's talking about defending the plan to accept this new Air Force One jet from Qatar. There's a whole lot wrong with this. So let's start this off. I'm going to play the whole clip where Trump is trying to defend this thing. So it's about 3 minutes, 42 seconds. So bear with me. And yeah, again, sorry for having to show Trump on here.
Has Qatar asked for anything in exchange for that $400 million luxury jumbo jet? And how can the American people be so sure that they will not in the future?
Well, I think what happens with the plane is that, we're very disappointed that it's taking Boeing so long to build a new Air Force One. We have an Air Force One that's 40 years old. And if you take a look at that compared to the new plane of the equivalent, stature at the time, it's not even the same ballgame. You look at some of the Arab countries and the planes they have parked alongside of the United States of America plane. It's like from a different planet. And it's close to 40 years old, might be more than 40 years old now.
All right, so part of this for Trump is the image that it shows, right? Oh, I have a 40-year-old plane. They have a brand new jet. Whatever, it's not the same thing, right? I mean, Air Force One is like a flying White House, basically. To compare that to some luxury jet that somebody's flying around in is just absolutely ridiculous on its face. But on top of that, the technology and what is inside that jet and how many times it's been retrofitted in the last 40 years, who knows, right? It's probably a completely new plane. Anyway, he's just concerned about image, it sounds like here.
And we, when I first came in, I signed an order to get it built. I took it over from the Obama administration. They had originally agreed. I got the price down much lower. And then when the election didn't exactly work out the way that it should have, a lot of work was not done on the plane because a lot of people didn't know. They made change orders that were so stupid, so ridiculous. And it ended up being a total mess, a real mess. And when I came back, I said, by the way, what's going on with the Boeings that are coming in? Well, sir, they're way behind. And they are. They're way behind. They were way behind. Another mess that I inherited from Biden. And it's going to be a while before we get them. And I think Qatar, who has really, we've helped them a lot over the years in terms of security and safety. I think they end very, very nicely. And I have a lot of respect for the leadership and for the leader, Qatar. And I think they knew about it because they buy Boeings. They buy a lot of Boeings. And they knew.
So the leader of Qatar is kind of like a dictator in a way, just so you know.
Knew about it, and they said we would like to do something, and if we can get a 747 as a contribution to our Defense Department to use during a couple of years while they're building the other ones, I think that was a very nice gesture. Now, I could be a stupid person and say, oh, no, we don't want a free plane. We give free things out. We'll take one.
It's not being a stupid person. It's actually following the law and the Constitution, as we're going to go over here in a second.
Too. And it helps us out because, again, we're talking about...
Actually, a stupid person would accept it.
We have 40-year-old aircraft.
To it.
The money we spend, the maintenance we spend on those planes to keep them tippy-top is astronomical. You wouldn't even believe it. So I think it's a great gesture from Qatar. I appreciate it very much. I would never be one to turn down that kind of an offer. I mean, I could be a stupid person and say, no, we don't want a free, very expensive airplane. But I thought it was a great gesture. And I think it was a gesture because of the fact that we have helped and continue to, we will continue to, all of those countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and others, we keep them safe If it wasn't for us, they probably wouldn't exist right now. And I think this was just a gesture of good faith. And I don't get it. Someday it'll be like Ronald Reagan. They decommission them. You know, they get to a certain age, they decommission them. It'll go to my library. They're talking about going to my library in years out. But I thought it was a great gesture. And it's something that was done by Ronald Reagan. They actually decommissioned the plane, and he put it in his library. And it actually has made the library, I think, a Boeing 707. It's actually made the library more successful. So it was good.
Do you plan to use the plane after you leave office?
No, I don't. No, it would go directly to the library after I leave office. I wouldn't be using.
Yeah, he wouldn't be using. No, God, no, I'm not going to use it after I'm out of office. Are you kidding? It's going to have all this gold shit in there and be like obnoxious and crazy. And it's going to be the best plane that's ever been gifted to the best president ever in the world. His words, not mine, by the way. Absolutely ridiculous. The smart person would say, no, I cannot accept that because it's against our laws and our Constitution. So there's something called the emoluments clause in the Constitution, right? It's in the same section. It's in Article 1, Section 9, the same as the writ of habeas corpus. It's a little bit further down that section, and here's what it says. No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept any present, emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state. Now that sounds pretty darn clear to me. So with the absence of the consent of Congress, the president cannot accept this plane. That's just the law. Now, will Congress vote to say, yeah, the president can have this plane? They could. I mean, it's all being controlled by Republicans. So I guess there is that possibility that can happen. But I really don't think that there's enough. I don't think there's enough people in Congress that would allow that to happen. So this is kind of stupid. It's kind of dumb. The smart president would have turned that down and said, yeah, well, thanks, but no thanks. This is not something that we can accept. You could thank him for the gesture or whatever, but it's breaking the law. It's against our Constitution. So he can look into it all he wants, but I really don't see that happening. It's kind of ridiculous. So anyway, there you go. I got a little more educated in the Constitution. I hope you did too today. And thank the Trump administration for allowing us to dig deeper into our own government to know what's right, what's wrong, what's legal, what's not. So I think it's important for every American, including myself, to know what is going on and what the law says. So anyway, appreciate you all watching. Thank you so much. Please like and subscribe. Try to be back tomorrow with another episode. Again, I said this week is going to be a little crazy. Definitely won't have an episode on Friday, but we'll see about tomorrow and Thursday. So thanks again for watching. Really do appreciate it. Please like and subscribe and take care until next time. Be good to each other. And we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.